Let's move on to some real work. So it seems, when was this from, Brendan?
April.
April. Wow,
I'm not Brendan. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I wanted Brendan to let us know. I feel like we really dropped the ball here. Dennis Miller back when he was on his tour, and I think we did some other stuff from his big tour at that time, his Dennis Miller 3.0 tour, where he had sort of shifted at 2.7. He was no longer political, and then he went back to political when he realized, like, nobody cares about me if I'm not political at all. And so
these are the post-Riley years.
Yeah, this is the post-Riley years. He's really wandering in the desert in many respects. And he found himself at sitting down with Ben Shapiro. Let's take this first clip. I don't know. We're just going to run. You guys have the clips, so let's just run these.
This is on AOC.
You shouldn't see it that way. So I'm about where I should be at 65 is the way I look at it.
I don't want to turn this into sort of a nostalgia play or you grousing about the young, but I look at AOC in the same way that I look at some of the comedians that I see working today.
You're
and that is
sexually attracted to them,
enthusiasm
too.
over skill. Do you get that impression also?
Sorry.
I look at AOC in the same way that I look at some of the comedians that I see working today, and that is enthusiasm over skill. Do you get that impression also, that there's a real draw toward the enthusiastic and the authentic as opposed to the craft, like actually working through things?
Well, the craft, I think, is, listen, there's some guys who are beautiful technicians.
Wait, pause it for a second. So he's trying to make this argument about AOC, and Miller, of course, picks it up in terms of comedy. What would be the craft that AOC lacks when she has just unseated one of the most powerful Democrats in the House at this point in April, and continues to have, she is now like the number 3 fundraiser, I think, in the Democratic caucus. Like, what craft do you think that Ben Shapiro thinks that AOC doesn't have?
She's doing this while being funnier than Dennis Miller just in those little videos she makes, right? She is truly funny. And he's jealous of her because of her humor.
All right, let's hear Dennis Miller's response.
Well, the craft, I think, is, listen, there's some guys who are beautiful technicians, and they literally would do syllable counts and peel it back. But the main directive, obviously.
And K's, right? You got to use K a lot, right?
You do syllables.
Some guys, first of all, everything he says in this whole thing, because I listened to the whole hour and 8 minutes, everything is a lie, including that there are guys who count syllables. Not one comic counts syllables. They may do laughs per minute or something like that.
So I already called him Fredo once. What do I do next? What is going to rhyme with Fredo?
Dough. Fredo. Okay, so that's 2. I want this to land with like 47 syllables. Go.
Authentic as opposed to the craft, like actually working through things.
Well, the craft, I think, is, listen, there's some guys who are beautiful technicians, and they literally would do syllable counts and peel it back. But the main directive, obviously, with comedy's always been getting laughs. Now, you can go out and do it in a myriad of ways. There are physical comedians, there are, intellectual comedians. You see some guys and you think, wow, that's so smart. But for the most part, it's all about the prime directive of getting laughs. I've noticed the change is more tectonic in that it's turned everybody's comedy act almost into an impersonator act. Like impressionists used to do, they go, what if Jack Nicholson was working at the Burger King? And I was always bridle. I lacked that gene where I could go with that, where I'd say, time out, he's one of the highest paid actors in the world. Why is he working at a fast food place? I couldn't even go there. But they do it, and then at the end, people applaud. And that's sort of what humor is now. Like, people will make a bold statement and get applause instead of big laughs. That's weird to me. It's sort of short-circuited the primal thing, that it's an involuntary gesture where somebody says something funny and you don't have to intellectualize it. You just find yourself, and that's the cool part.
Wait a second.
Now
wait
it's
a second.
people going,
wait a second. Pause it.
All I want to say is that you are really, this next segment where Ben Shapiro on comedy is maybe the greatest thing I've ever heard.
All right, but wait, before we go into this, let me get this straight. Dennis Miller, who built his entire career on what people perceive to be cleverness, right? Like, there's no gut, visceral laughter of like, this guy had more lint on him than a battleship that had just come back from picking up some tribbles or something. Like, like his whole career was based on cleverness, not gut laughs.
Count the syllables.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Right.
It's an involuntary gesture where somebody says something funny and you don't have to intellectualize it. You just find yourself, and that's the cool part of it. Now it's people going, And so that's a big change for comedy.
Yeah. The term that I've heard used about this is clapter, that people are not actually laughing anymore. They're clapping, and this is the Hannah Gadsby version of comedy, where you have think pieces now about why for thousands of years we've actually been getting the entire concept of comedy wrong. It's not that we're supposed to laugh at things. It's supposed to, if we laugh at things, it's actually bad. We're supposed to think about things, and then the thinking is the humor. It seems to me that we are reshifting the entire nature of humanity around what a bunch of very politically driven people want it to be. Because, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Jay Leno was on television and trying to be funny, and now you've got people on TV in late night who I don't even know if they're trying to be funny anymore. I mean, legitimately. I think that Fallon may be the only late night host who's even making an occasional attempt to be funny. I don't know what your opinion is of the current
I think
late night
Jimmy's a
crowd.
great entertainer, and I like that about him.
I'd still like to get on.
I think that you have to understand if you want to.
Pause it. Wait a second. So I'm just. This is. I mean, Andy, I want you to go, but he's complaining about people doing political comedy, which is all that Dennis Miller has been doing for 16, 17 years now. And he cites, the one thing he cites to try and argue that people used to be funny is Jay Leno.
Well, that's the thing. Ben Shapiro, he goes, I'm old enough to remember when Jay Leno was on television and trying to be funny. Yeah, I do too. When he took the show away from Letterman and he wasn't funny for the rest of his life. I mean, he's using Leno as an example. But the other thing is he says it very quickly. This is the Hannah Gadsby version of comedy where we get think pieces. We're not supposed to laugh at things. It's just a complete. She does a show where she talks about how she came to this part in her life where she didn't want to do the stuff that she was doing before, and he's making it like there's a Hannah Gadsby school of comedy where all you do is think pieces. I mean, it literally is amazing how out of touch both of them are.
Great critique of Hannah Gadsby in the New Yorker, though. I will say that. I have to just put.
I haven't read that yet, but no, I did see that.
It was very good. It was a very unfredo piece, Andy. Don't start harassing the person who wrote the New Yorker review.
What'd you call me? Okay.
I called you Portnoy.
Keep going.
I think Jimmy's a great entertainer, and I like that about him. I think that you have to understand if you want to. At some point, you would lose those jobs if you look how good Jimmy is at it. Jimmy Fallon. I've been on Jimmy.
We can probably move to the next clip, actually.
Yeah, all right.
Let me say one thing though. He argues that Fallon got in trouble for doing pro-Trump material, like the fluffing of his hair. I mean, it's like it's just incredible. He thinks that Jimmy would do pro-Trump material, but he's afraid to.
This is about Trump's proletarian chops.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Dad, who's the Boilermaker who never got anywhere near that. I always think, wow, in an odd way, the most patrician of these guys, or I shouldn't say patrician, but the billionaire guy comes in and he has a stranglehold on what the hoi polloi mean. I'm fascinated by that. I think it was all those years of him in a hard hat walking through construction sites.
Oh my God.
With the power tie on, but he also has to cohabitate with all these cats who are throwing the building up, or he has nothing. Something gave him these proletariat chops, which I admire about him. Whenever they say, just this morning,
proletariat chops.
I should let you ask questions about him. Off on some rant here, but I saw again this morning that.
I mean,
did you know that look up the word patrician? Look up the word patrician. He refers to Trump as an aristocrat, and then he takes it back. Well, maybe I shouldn't say he's a patrician.
Right.
We do have some Hitler talk coming up too here.
Okay.
Yeah, the Hitler rant here, but
I saw again this morning that a couple of Democratic candidates, Castro, I forget his name, is it Julian?
Julian Castro.
Julian Castro, and somebody else said Trump reminds him of the Third Reich.
Yeah, Beto.
Beto. And I always look at this stuff and I think, oh, for God's sakes, do you not see that you're not being clever about how you're playing this guy? If you do hate him, if you do hate what he wants, if you want him out.
If you do.
To throw down the Hitler thing, and then here's even the backup plan on that. If you say, well, listen, when you say he's Hitler-like, obviously my flashcard in my head is the systematic liquidation of 6 million of his fellow human beings. I haven't seen anything like that from Trump. And they'll say, oh, of course I didn't mean that. And you'll say, well, what other Hitler peccadillo were you seizing on? You know, the shitty mustache, the bad house painter reviews on Angie's List. Of course, when you say Hitler. So again, this morning, even today, you've got Beto O'Rourke's positing himself as a young hipster. A young hipster does not come in and say the man in the Oval Office right now. To me, it's such an awkward, clumsy overplay. Is like Adolf Hitler.
Okay.
It's just,
What is the syllable count on that, guys?
This is unbelievable. This is of course before the El Paso shooting, and he's talking about nobody in camps. This guy is literally a moron who doesn't even know what Trump is doing. He has no idea what's happening.
Well,
it's embarrassing.
First of all, he also doesn't know how many people died in the Holocaust. He's only talking about the Jews. There was another 3 million who were exterminated. And
he wants to wait till they're all exterminated. He goes, tell me after they've killed 6 million people. That's seems to be what he's saying.
But this is this is a broad, and for Dennis Miller, who I think at one point in his career tried to sell himself as the thinking man's comedian. This is the problem with our understanding of what fascism is, right? Like, it's that he was fascistic and that he had to go through certain thresholds to bring about that kind of stuff. And
right.
And who else are you going to point to, right? Like Trump's like Franco. Nobody's gonna know who you're talking about. Like there's
yeah, because he's actually more like he actually looks similar to Mussolini. If you ever actually look at Trump, but the point of him saying the fact is that Dennis Miller literally does not want. He knows now this is his audience, so he'll lie. He'll say anything to pretend that this guy is good. It's really sickening. He spends the whole hour basically saying how great Trump is because I think he's saying the other comics are afraid. They're afraid to go against Trump. He's afraid to go. He's afraid to do anything because he's trapped in this horrible, unfunny character.
Do you
now
think
of some
do you think
old
this is just like
idiot.
basically like I need one more priming of the pump of my career, and so that's what this tour was about. Let's keep rolling.
Oh, we're going to skip ahead here to where
Okay.
Miller talking about a great Monday Night Football joke he did.
I knew I wasn't long for that one because I was trying to shoehorn what I do, which is Weird Arcania, into the National Football League game. I remember they'd get mail like, what is
Paz, I just want to remind you that earlier he was bemoaning the fact that comedy is no longer about sort of visceral laughs.
Primal.
And he's talking about doing Weird Arcania,
Yes.
which is not exactly the huge guffaw jokes, but go ahead.
into the National Football League game? I remember they'd get mail like, what is he talking about?
What was that
the
reference?
Plantagenets. I remember, are we on cable? Can you say?
You can say whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you a great story. We're doing a game one night, and this
be
receiver
great.
hurts his ankle.
Yeah, say something
and
funny.
Wrapping it in an ace bandage, and on the air, I try to make Al laugh, and the Weird Arcania is what makes him laugh. Because Al's a genius, but if you throw him off his feet, he can't gather it, and he's like a tipsy air traffic controller. It gets a little weird, so I spend all my time trying to get him to laugh. So they show him wrapping the ankle, and I go, Al, I haven't seen that much fabric used since the environmental artist Christo wrapped the Pont Neuf Bridge in Paris. And I remember Al hits his sneeze button, which cuts his voice out to the home viewer. He looks at us.
Al Michaels is a genius. As we all know, Al Michaels is an absolute genius. I mean, this guy is like, he thinks because he got the Christo reference. They're all celebrating in the booth.
Yeah, but also this keeps cutting against exactly everything he said in the first half of the interview, which is like people are now just looking for a clap. Like there's nothing.
That's right.
He's using
That's
so
exactly
much
right.
cloth.
Oh my God,
This,
he got the Christo reference. He's good.
yeah, the Christo reference. Oh my God, you can see everybody just guffawing. No, it's like, oh, he's clever. He knew about that that art, that art installation.
Did you ever see him on Monday Night Football? He was the absolute worst. He was it made me hate words and commentary for years afterwards. He was just awful. Awful.
I think that's actually where the term conversation ender was coined. Go. What do we got next? More of that?
Is that more of this? There's more of this little clip here.
Okay.
Because Al's a genius, but if you throw him off his feet, he can't gather it. And he's like a tipsy air traffic controller. It gets a little weird. So I spend all my time trying to get him to laugh. So they show him wrapping the ankle. And I go, Al, I haven't seen that much fabric used since the environmental artist Christo wrapped the Pont Neuf Bridge in Paris. And I remember Al hits the sneeze button, which cuts his voice out to the home viewer. He looks
The sneeze button. The sneeze button. He hits the sneeze button.
Olmeyer, our producer's down in the truck, and he fancies himself an art aficionado. I actually hear him say, "No, Al, Christo, environmental artist, good call, good call." And I remember simultaneously delighting in that and thinking, I'm not long for this. Because you can't, they're watching football. I would have whacked me too. It was like when I heard Madden left Fox, I called Fouts.
Can I just say one thing? The comics today don't, if you laugh every time you open up your mouth, you are the biggest hack in the history of the world. He literally laughs every sentence. He can't stop cracking himself up.
He can't stop cracking himself up like the environmental artist Christo.
He gets it. He gets it.
Like I told Jimmy Fallon.
That story sounds an awful lot like a story about producers like coming to their wits' end and he kind of has some self-awareness about that, but I feel like if you were in the room, you'd be like, yeah, everyone's sick of Dennis Miller's crap.
Everybody's sick of his nonsense.
Like, why
they
does
must
Dennis
hate
Miller
him. They must,
need
and,
to show?
6 minutes later, you don't have to say this, but 6 minutes later, he says, "I'm reading Atlas Shrugged again as we speak."
Are you serious?
And let's also like the wrapping of the Pont Neuf, and I think this happened in sometime in the 80s because I think I was in college at this time.
Oh my God!
But
here we go.
But that would have been, I think, contemporaneous with his work, but. It couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years early. I mean, it wasn't like that's a really arcane reference. It was just a really inappropriate reference. It wasn't like you were digging deep, like, wow, you really know your art history. You're aware of that massive outdoor installation, which got a lot of coverage. It's like, I don't know. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that this idea, like you said, the idea that people get the reference and therefore that's the joke, and that it's like when people go, "Oh, you didn't get my Like I've heard comics do something like they go Dostoevsky. "Oh, you didn't get my Dostoevsky reference." I mean, what do you do? What kind of world are we living in where you want people to be proud of you because you can reference a Russian author?
Sorry, I didn't get your Tolstoy reference, Portnoy. Oh.
One of my opening jokes back in the day when I had a little more facial hair was to do the old, "Hey folks, I know you're looking at me and you're saying, what the hell is Andre Bresson doing up there?"
I don't know who that is. Who is that?
That is good.
Some random French philosopher.
I know what you people are thinking. When did Horshack marry someone who doesn't look like Horshack?
I mean, it was completely. It was just I was just mocking people who would do that. That was all I was doing. I was just being a.
It's like all of my comedy was about.
All of my comedy.
We didn't call it
basic,
subtweeting then, but it was subtweeting other comedians.
No, all of my comedy was actually just subtweeting the audience. Like, how dare you?
Good evening. I hate you and the other performers.
Exactly. For the next 20 minutes, I will tell you how much I hate you, but the word hate will never cross my lips. Go.
Here he is on the Iran deal in Obama.
Oh God.
This is the best.
Let's stick to installation art, all right? God.
Stu, as I got older, it just didn't make sense to me anymore, some of that stuff. And as I get older yet, It still doesn't make sense to me. And listen, they always say, "Oh, Trump's insane," and I guess Obama's held up as the avatar of, wisdom in that. And I
Lack
always
of
think,
insanity.
Who loads 1.8 billion onto a pallet and sends it to Iran? I mean, I'm kind of, people say that's so naive. I can hear John Kerry say, and I go, well, you overthink it. I just know they live to kill the Jews. I dig the Jews. I'm not even Jewish, but I dig the Jews just because they live in the craziest cul-de-sac in the world. And anytime you prepackage 1.8, just the fact that they would ask for it in cash, I'd say, oh, why don't I just give you a check and fill the memo section on kill Jews? You know what I mean? It's obviously, anytime you're sending unmarked cash to Iran, some of it's going to end up bombing a Sbarro pizza parlor. That stuff doesn't make sense to me. And I can't fake like it does. I have to stop down on each issue.
The stuff you just said didn't make sense. Is that what he's saying?
First off, can I just say, in terms of style, the idea that you would in 2019 say without irony, "I dig the Jews," and they
I know, because they live in the crazy. Someone's got to put that as a. They live in the craziest cul-de-sac on earth, man. It's crazy over there.
So we got Portnoy over here living in the crazy cul-de-sac. That guy's just trying to jerk off and work out his mom issues, and the Iranians are trying to blow him up. So I dig him.
I dig the Jews. Look, I dig them. I dig the Jews. This is a Palestinian cat saying this, and the other guy saying that.
And here he is on Obama spending.
That is funny, though. John Kerry, like, let's fill out the memo line. Go at the Jews. All right, deal signed.
I would say.
And he ignores that there's an Iran deal. He doesn't even mention that there's a nuclear deal.
Right.
Like, he doesn't even understand
we just dropped
that.
them off. What was cash also that we owed them, frankly. But,
Yeah.
go ahead.
He has turned out to be very conservative. I mean, he's led, I would say, on most big issues. You're more conservative than me. I'm pretty conservative, but he's done pretty well as far as checking conservative boxes, hasn't he?
Well, certainly with regard to tax cuts, with cutting regulation, with appointing conservative judges, moving the embassy to Jerusalem. He's done a lot of great stuff. I mean, the one area where I think the Republican Party continues to be a giant fail is, of course, on spending and entitlements. And they will be a fail for as long as any party can be a fail.
On that. This is the reason stuff that I think you can talk about where they should talk about it with him. Yeah, we're spending our ass off. I don't think we're spending at the same speed that we did under Obama, but certainly it's not enough of a thing where you go, oh, he's notched back on that. I think that
we are.
I can't.
Not at all.
Oh, my God.
We're spending more.
Unbelievable. He doesn't have a fact in his head. He literally is a stupid. I'm sorry to say this. He's a profoundly stupid man.
It's true. And let me just make this clear. The deficit may have increased, although I don't think that's even the case anymore. But the deficit, when it increased, was a function of tax revenues going down. And then the tax cuts that came in the form of the stimulus package, the spending was only half of that. And we're spending far more now. We just added 10 years worth of Pentagon spending at $700 billion.
Yeah, and how can you? I mean, it is sad to me, and that's not sad. He's just such a moron that he doesn't care enough. He's too self-absorbed to care about what the actual facts are of anything.
He's sort of like a non-Italian Fredo, posing as a Portnoy.
He's like a Fredo. He's like a Fredo without a brother.